All thoughts and opinions expressed on WRHU's Queerly Informed do not reflect the views of Hofstra University, the Board of Trustees, or Radio Hofstra University. All contrasting thoughts or suggestions can be sent to programming at wrhu.org or to Room 127 Herbert Hall, 111 Hofstra University, Hempstead, New York, 11549.
Welcome to the 10th installation of Season 4 of Queerly Informed.
I'm Bryana Neff.
And I'm Summer Savaria.
And we'll have all the latest in international, national, and local LGBTQ news.
A moderate gay city council candidate beats a Mamdani-backed candidate to represent the area that includes Stonewall.
Palm Beach says it will not fix an air conditioning unit for a community center over an anti-DEI law that has yet to go into effect.
A city in Utah has ordered to pay $350,000 in legal fees to drag queens.
And more.
For your QI Health Report, I'm Xia Tuttle, with more on HIV patients in Senegal skipping treatments over fears they may be arrested for being LGBTQ+.
And for your special QI interview, I'm Camryn Bowden, sitting down with one of the executive producers of Drop of Drag this year, Chelle Jung.
Thank you for joining us today. Let's get into the headlines. Openly gay politician Carl Wilson has won an election for councilman of Manhattan's 3rd District, often referred to as the birthplace of the gay rights movement. The district is home to several historic places in queer history, including the Stonewall Monument and Greenwich Village. Wilson, the former chief of staff for the outgoing representative of the district, won against Lindsay Boylan, a more progressive candidate backed by New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Wilson won by a large margin, taking 43% of the vote in a race with 4 candidates. His victory makes him the 5th openly queer person to represent this district. The newly elected councilman ran on the platforms of keeping housing affordable, strengthening public transit, and protecting the rights of trans people. Wilson told The Advocate that preserving trans rights in particular is, quote, a priority that I want to be front and center in my work. Now more than ever, people have to be speaking up and standing up for what is right.
I mean, as reported in the story, Wilson is a moderate Democrat, and, you know, there were more progressive candidates, especially ones backed by Mamdani. I mean, I think it's interesting that a moderate Democrat kind of won versus these progressive candidates, especially considering some of them were backed by, of course, New York Mayor Mamdani. But I think it just goes to the fact that he was the only queer person running, and I think that this district in particular values the protection of queer people so much, and I think that's so good to see that they are getting what they feel they need. They feel the need to be represented by him, and they feel the need to be represented by a queer person, and I think it's great and amazing that there are queer people in politics in some of these districts where queer protection is so necessary.
Yeah, and I will say that it's not like Mamdani had like a margin that wasn't too intense during his election in 2025. He saw a pretty big outpour of support. That's on top of being very unequivocally, unapologetically pro-LGBTQ+, pro-trans, right? So it is interesting to see how this area might have decided, you know, I think that we need a more moderate gay candidate for office. Now, I don't know much about Lindsay Boylan. Maybe she isn't queer, or maybe there is not something there. And maybe the people who are in this district really want having queer representation to represent them in politics. So, I mean, I think there's a couple different things that could be at play here. But it is interesting because it's not like Mamdani wasn't hugely successful in 2025. And as a result, it's not like progressive politicians in general weren't very successful. They were. So it is a very interesting dynamic to see this district saying, you know, we're going to opt for a more moderate candidate.
On Friday, May 1st, Palm Beach County Administrator Joe Abruzzo announced that the decision to deny funding to fix the AC of an LGBTQ community center has been reversed. The funding request came from the city of Lake Worth Beach, where they requested $302,000 in order to repair damage to the roof and air conditioning of the Compass Community Center, a long-running queer nonprofit. Palm Beach County denied the request due to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' recently signed legislation banning local DEI programs. Abruzzo cites the reason for the reversal came down to the fact that DeSantis' legislation, though being signed on April 24th, will not go into effect until 2027. Abruzzo told local news outlet Palm Beach Post, "I'm very comfortable reversing the decision and putting it back on schedule because approving the money this year would break no laws."
Yeah, this entire story is absolutely insane to me. This is honestly the first time hearing of this law in Florida banning DEI programs. I think that's such an insane law to even be going into effect, because what does that mean? Like, it's such a broad category that it's like, what are we even banning? Is it just banning anything that the Florida governor doesn't like? Because I think that's a really, really scary precedent to be setting, especially in a state as big and as, I guess, important in our country as Florida. And the fact that this law is being used, and even though this decision was reversed, it's going into effect in 2027. So the fact that this law could be used to deny community centers for marginalized people in this area access to AC in a place like Florida is so scary to me, that we're just allowed to deny these people basic comforts and basic human rights because we don't like what they stand for. That's a slippery slope, and it's a bad place to be heading towards.
I mean, yes, thank God this decision was reversed. Showing that even Florida can have some sort of protection, can defend our community to some extent. But that doesn't mean that, like you said, the law will still be going into effect in 2027, and not only just affecting queer Floridians, but affecting millions of people, because the Compass Community Center also serves people living with HIV and AIDS, and I feel like that it doesn't just affect queer people, that affects millions of people around the world. It affects millions of people day to day, and taking away these resources, taking away funding for repairs to a community center because it is queer and it is a local DEI program, I think blinds some people to the fact that you're not just hurting the queer community, you're not just hurting whatever community is being served by local DEI events, but you're hurting everybody.
A group of drag queens recently received $350,000 in a lawsuit settlement with the city of St. George, Utah, after a federal judge ruled that the city violated their First Amendment rights. Back in 2023, these drag queens applied for an event permit to put on a family-friendly drag show in a public park owned by the city of St. George. They were denied the permit, starting a 3-year legal battle. The city put on the defense that their refusal to put on the event was a neutral enforcement of their rules concerning events. However, attorneys from the ACLU were able to prove that these rules were being enforced selectively to discriminate against marginalized groups of people. Although the case was settled in 2025, it was only last week that a judge ordered St. George to make the payment to the prevailing party.
It is absolutely insane to me that this has been going on for 3 years. I mean, I don't know if these attorneys from ACLU were taking this case pro bono or not, but if they were not, that means that it has been 3 years of essentially a money battle between these drag queens and the city of St. George. I mean, I hope that these drag queens were given pro bono, but I mean, 3 years, oh my God, 3 years is such a long time for simply the stupidest denial, because it is because of a quote unquote neutral enforcement of rules. Because that, I mean, I'm glad that it has been realized that that doesn't make sense. Why would you deny an event, a family-friendly event in a public park, just because of four little letters, DRAG scares people, drag scares people in power, because truly I think they don't understand it. And I think that we've seen that time and time again, where drag shows get shut down, drag queens get prosecuted simply because people don't understand their work and don't understand the value that they provide to communities.
Again, it goes back to even the last story where it's like, these laws are, it's okay, it's neutral enforcement, or it's your removal of DEI things, whatever it might be. It's so much like, nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense. Everything is like cherry picked and maneuvered so that it fits this kind of idea that they're trying to remove things that are not in the quote-unquote norm that conservative elements, far-right actors have proclaimed is normal, right? Drag is abnormal. Being queer is abnormal. So as a result, anything that we do, anything that we write, whether it says it explicitly or not, we can use to apply to anything that is abnormal. Because you know what? If there is, instead of a drag performance at a public park, there is a recreation of the killing of Jesus Christ and the crucifixion of him, that's okay. That's totally fine. But at the end of the day, what these two things are doing is performance, right? You have drag, which is performing, flamboyantly in a queer manner, and you have a recreation of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It is the same thing at the end of the day. They are performances being put on for public benefit, right? And one thing is completely fine, and another thing is completely not okay. And I guarantee that if something like this were to happen, where they have these two events, one is absolutely going to be given a permit because that's in the norm. But the other thing is going to be abnormal, it's weird, and it can't happen.
Next up, we have our health report with Xia Tuttle.
In response to the ongoing anti-LGBTQ plus crackdown in Senegal, there has been a decline in patients visiting HIV treatment centers. In this nation where homosexuality has been illegal since 1966, these laws for, quote, acts against nature have been tightened with waves of arrest around the country. Among the recent changes was the doubling of the maximum sentence for same-sex acts, the criminalization of any promotion of these acts, and a major increase in the maximum fine. At just one of these raids this past month, nearly 20 people were arrested. In fear of facing similar detainment, patients are now skipping HIV treatment altogether.
I would say it's insane to me. I really would, but it at this point, it doesn't shock me. Yes, of course people are not going to be going and getting treatment because they are literally persecuted for like we've talked about, the almost McCarthy Red Scare of just being afraid of being called queer with little to no evidence, even though I don't know how you show evidence of being queer. But I mean, yeah, people are scared that any action they do in some of these countries and even in some of these counties and places in the U.S., they're scared that, that accusation might lead to them losing their job. It might lead to them being arrested. It might lead to harm coming to them because they are not in a supportive area. These stories at this point, it surprises me every single time, and yet it is just a reminder of the same things.
And aside from this, perspective of these people are likely going to face violence, and this is like a very crazy, archaic thing to have happen in the big of 2026. Also, from a global health standpoint, this is really dangerous because when you have people that are undergoing drug treatment for something like HIV and AIDS, and we saw this with tuberculosis as well, when they stop that treatment and those antibiotics that they're on, it leads to the creation of HIV strains that are now resistant to those drugs that they were on, which is super, super dangerous. And when people stop getting treatment, that also increases the transmission of these diseases. So now you have a situation where this country, where they're trying to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS, well, now the result of laws like this is instead you're spreading drug-resistant HIV and AIDS that are now going to become harder and harder to treat. And this is something that we're seeing on an increase worldwide, and that's really dangerous. You hear all this talk about, a super virus, like what will we do if one of these viruses mutates enough where we can't treat it anymore? And we're getting there. We're getting very close. tuberculosis is close enough to being like that worldwide. We really, really don't need another. So it's just really unfortunate to see something like this happening. For your Queerly Informed Health Report, I'm Xia Tuttle.
Thank you to Xia Tuttle for that report.
Welcome to this week's Trans Newsbreak.
In a stunning development in the immigration crackdown, the Trump administration sent a government plane to Cuba to return a 10-year-old, who federal and state authorities say might have been taken to Cuba to get a gender transition surgery.
Rose Inessa Ethington, a transgender woman, and her partner, Blue Inessa Ethington, were charged with international parent kidnapping, as the child is currently at the center of a complicated custody fight.
According to the complaint, the couple visited Canada for a camping trip and then turned off their phones after telling the child's mother they'd arrived in Vancouver, and then flew to Mexico and then to Cuba on April 1st.
President Trump has also announced his nominee for Surgeon General, Nicole Saphir, who is known as a Fox News contributor and anti-trans voice, who has said that being trans is a fad and a trend among youth.
This is Trump's third nominee after another Fox News contributor and wellness influencer. Saphir has said that transgender youth in the country is a mental health, quote, national emergency.
Saphir has also, in the past, criticized the American Academy of Pediatrics for its evidence-based immunization schedule that was released after the Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr.'s revised vaccination schedule.
Transgender pro wrestler Kid Bandit appears to have finished her final match, leaving the ring in tears during her appearance at Effie's Big Gay Brunch, an LGBTQ+ wrestling showcase that occurs the same weekend as WWE's WrestleMania.
In an interview on Queerly Informed with my co-anchor, Summer Savaria, Kid Bandit talked about the state of the country.
If I could do a do-over, I'd be off grid right now. I wouldn't be a public figure. I'd be like, yo, nobody's gonna know like anything about me. I'm gonna live in like a cabin far away and do my thing until hopefully one day like who I am isn't like being questioned anymore. That's how I would go about it. But that's not who I am. Like I'm loud and I'm brazen and I'm abrasive and I have a platform and I like using that platform for for the causes I believe in. So
Absolutely.
I think, you know, being able to just exist is the ultimate form of resistance, right? But existence doesn't just necessarily mean like, oh, yay, I'm alive. Like, no, existence means living, going out, having fun, being able to like, you know, find whimsy and happiness, even in times where a lot of that is being attacked. You know, a lot of that is being taken away from you.
In her post on X, she wrote, quote, "That's all, folks. Thanks for tuning in." Chants of "Thank you, Bandit" exploded from the crowd at the conclusion of the match.
A new study dedicated to studying desistance, or the act of someone who previously identified as trans reverting to identify as cisgender post-puberty, has debunked an argument that most trans children grow out of being transgender.
The study, published in Psychology of Sexual Orientation and Gender Diversity, emerged after a 2016 blog post that 60 to 90% of trans youth desist from being transgender.
One of the lead authors explained that the idea of 60 to 90% desistance has been used for years, and is recently, quote, being used for things like legislation and bans of best practice gender-affirming care in 26 states.
First off, I want to say this story is so confusing and weird and so unusual. And I think it's ludicrous to me that the U.S. government and the Trump administration itself is getting involved in this. You know, it's one thing to say like it's like state and federal authorities who are getting involved, but the Trump administration itself sending a plane to retrieve this 10-year-old, I think, is so wild. We have so many other things that we need to be focusing on right now, and the Trump administration's decision to retrieve this 10-year-old, as opposed to it being federal or state authorities retrieving this child, it's just very weird, and it makes no sense to me. Now, what I will say is this story is just even gets more confusing and convoluted because, number one, Cuba has a ban on gender-affirming surgeries for minors, point blank, period. So it doesn't make any sense how Rose Inessa Ethington and the partner Blue would potentially get a gender-affirming surgery for this child because Cuba has it outright banned. Just point blank, period. There is some stuff that's kind of confusing, like that the partner Blue Inessa Ethington had withdrawn $10,000 from the checking account and that there were instructions from a mental health therapist to send a therapist $10,000 in instructions on gender-affirming medical care for children, according to the complaint, but it did not mention Cuba at all. It's just so weird and confusing, and there's just so much like, what is happening here? That it's just, it only gets weirder when the Trump administration sends a plane to do it and to retrieve this child. I think that just gets to a weird point.
I do want to talk a little bit about Trump's new nominee for Surgeon General, Nicole Safier. I did look her up. She is honestly more qualified than I expected her to be. She does have a medical degree, which can't be said for everyone that Trump has considered for this position. So I'm glad that she at least has a medical degree. She is a radiologist. But I think it's very dangerous to have someone in this position that holds opinions such as that being trans is a fad or a trend among youth. It is so dangerous, especially at a time in this country when trans healthcare is under jeopardy for not just trans kids like we thought at the beginning of this administration, but also adults. And it's a dangerous mindset to be in, that this is a trend among youth, because what does that mean for when these trans youth become adults? Are they going to have access to care? Are they going to be taken seriously with this Surgeon General leading a lot of healthcare decisions and influencing decisions throughout this country?
Yeah, and I mean, with this study that's being done too about desistance, like, this is really nice for me, at least, to see sort of these studies that, you know, the right-wing sort of anti-trans people keep like pushing forward, to see their statistics, you know, get debunked. And it's really nice. I mean, this is a preprint, so, you know, it still has to be peer-reviewed and whatnot, but things are, you know, going in the right direction. They did, I took a look, but, you know, they're doing a meta-analysis sort of standpoint, which I, you know, think is very significant for this sort of research, to get sort of a big sample size to really have some substance to that disproving of these previous studies. So it's really nice to see something like this getting, you know, taking those steps to getting published, getting out there, so that, you know, when we talk about, you know, these studies are crazy, we have that. So good on that. Good on Dr. Catherine Wall.
And rounding off with Kid Bandit, I mean, Kid Bandit, someone in the wrestling industry that means so much to me. She means so much to so many people. One of the true stars in the independent scene over the past couple of years. Someone who I still am shocked never was signed to a major wrestling promotion. I think that is one of maybe the biggest misses in wrestling over the past probably 2 decades. But Kid Bandit, though she is leaving the wrestling scene, and that saddens me so deeply, she is moving on to bigger and better things, doing T4T wrestling in Los Angeles. She's recently been promoted as one of the head coaches for T4T wrestling in Los Angeles, as well as, I believe, one of the possible performers for it. But, I mean, she is destined for greatness in whatever field she chooses. And if it's something as important as T4T wrestling, or if it's something as silly as pro wrestling for Effie's Big Gay Brunch, I mean, I hope and I know that she will find her audience, she will find success, and she will find a truly beautiful legacy wherever she ends up. Before we end off our show, here's Camryn Bowden with your Queerly Informed Drop of Drag interview.
Drop of Drag is Hofstra University's student-run drag show, which brings together student producers and talent for a night of fun performances. This year, the show will be at Adams Playhouse tomorrow at 7 p.m. and will feature headliner Aja, a competitor on the massively popular RuPaul's Drag Race for Season 9 and in Seasons 3 and 10 of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars. This is the 3rd year that Drop of Drag has been a fixture on Hofstra's campus and will be hosted by local drag queen Coco Del Rey. This year, a portion of the proceeds from tickets will be donated to Point of Pride, which provides financial aid and resources for trans individuals. We're joined by one of the executive producers this year, Chelle Jung, a senior public relations and strategic communications student, to talk more about the show. Thanks for joining us, Chelle.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off today with just a little bit about you. Why did you decide to run or to be one of the executive producers for this year's show?
So one of the closest people I've met at Hofstra, and actually my first friend, is Aiden Judge, who co-executive produced the show last year and has helped on it in previous years. So after he graduated, a lot of people were hesitant to take on something as big as Drop of Drag, especially because it's still pretty new. Like you said, only 3 years in, and there's still some like kinks and production challenges that we've had to go through. But I didn't want to see it disappear. Like, even though I never produced anything before, because PR majors don't produce anything actually. My friend Minta and I, we really want to see it continue because it's such a big, like, I feel like we need something like Drop of Drag right now more than ever. And that's why I decided, I mean, if Aiden can do it and he's a PR major, then so can I.
Absolutely. So why do you think it's really important to have a drag race or drag show like this on campus?
The same reason why I chose the nonprofit we're going to donate to this year. I feel like under the current legislation and the climate of the government and how trans and non-binary people, I feel like, are really being affected the most in the LGBTQIA plus community. I want to bring something that will provide like resources.
Yeah, sure.
Gender resources. Thank you. To the community, especially like helping out them in a direct way.
Yeah, absolutely.
This year's show will feature a local drag queen as host as opposed to the student hosts from previous years. Queerly Informed's own Matt Fisher was a host last year, but talk us through the decision to have a local drag queen host instead.
Matt and Magnolia were amazing last year, of course, but I felt that because it's a drag show, I think it would be really cool to have a local drag queen host it. And I have a friend, her name is Coco, and I've known her for a long time, and she is just a fabulous, fierce queen, and I know that she would love to help me out in something as amazing as Drop of Drag. So I decided to ask her, and she said yes for a really cheap price.
So Drop of Drag will also have RuPaul's Drag Race alum Aja as the headliner for the show. In the past, RuPaul's Drag Race alums Raja, Gemini, and William have been headliners. First of all, talk us through how Drop of Drag gets such storied names to headline their events.
So we have contacts with different drag agencies, and I contacted Aja's agent. Her name is Gina, and Gina basically gave us a roster of drag queens that would be able to perform, and depending on our budget that we got this year, we chose Aja because I think if anyone watches RuPaul's Drag Race, she turns it out every season, and she's such a big and great personality, and yeah.
So what was your reaction to getting Aja this year?
So last semester we did choose Aja, but then Gina has emailed us saying that, oh, just kidding, she's going to have surgery around that time, so she won't be able to come. So we actually had another queen that was going to do it in her place, Dawn, but literally maybe 3 weeks before the show, Gina emailed us again and said, oh, Dawn has a press week that the same week of Drop of Drag or like leading up to that, and it was for the new All-Star seasons. I come to find out later, but I was in my class reading that email and I almost broke down, but it's okay because we emailed Gina yet again, and apparently Aja was able to perform this time, or like come to our school and perform. So it honestly ended up working out, but there was definitely a lot of anxiety regarding the back and forth of that.
So this year, the show is also donating part of its proceeds to Point of Pride. Could you just tell us a little bit more as to what Point of Pride is and what they do?
Yeah. So Point of Pride is a LGBTQIA plus nonprofit organization that specializes giving financial resources to trans and non-binary individuals. So some of the things they do is donate money for like hormone replacement therapy, or providing access to binders or laser hair removal.
So before we end off our interview, could you just remind our audience when and where they can see the show and how they can buy tickets?
Yes. So the show will be tomorrow night, May 6th, 7 to 9 p.m. at Adams Playhouse, but the doors open at 6:30. You could buy tickets online through our Instagram, Drop of Drag Hofstra, and there's a link in our bio, but you could also buy tickets at the door.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chelle, for joining us today on Queerly Informed. If you are interested in finding out more about this show, the Drop of Drag Instagram has more. For your Queerly Informed interview, I'm Camryn Bowden.
Thank you for tuning in to Queerly Informed this week, here on 88.7 FM Radio Hofstra University, Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Thank you to the entire Queerly Informed team for your work on this week's edition.
We also want to extend a massive thank you to our graduating seniors who are leaving or left us, including Harrison Rosen and Emma Idle, two of our amazing staff editors, Alex Hoy, our engineer extraordinaire, and Riley Horvath, a reporter on our show.
Join us back here next week to hear the latest in queer news, as well as commentary from our group of LGBTQ reporters.
As always, if you have any suggestions for stories or content that you would like to hear, send them our way through email at queerlyinformedwrhu@gmail.com.
Thank you again to our health reporter today, Xia Tuttle, and our interview guest, Chelle Jung, for their work on today's show.
For Queerly Informed, I'm Summer Savaria.
And I'm Bryana Neff.
Thank you for tuning in.